Hi, and welcome back to another episode of ADK Talks. Whether it's a place to stay, eat, shop, or something to experience, we bring you the best of the Adirondacks. We can be your guides to discovering the amazing things to do in New York State's 6 million acre Adirondack Park. Today, we're joined by a legit Adirondack guide, Matt Burnett. He is, in addition to taking people on excursions in all 4 seasons and showing the real wild side of the Adirondack Park, he's also an artist, an educator, and a 6th generation local. Welcome to ADK Talks, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Jane. I'm glad to be here.
We're super excited. So you do everything, it seems like, from paddling quiet rivers to skiing hidden backcountry trails. And it's really, your trips seem like they're more than adventures. They're rooted in history and have a deep connection to place. Tell us, just in your words, what exactly is an Adirondack guide?
The way I like to think about it, the Adirondack Guide is a liaison between the resources and culture for this area, especially for people that are not from this area. In short, we're fun brokers.
Oh, wow. I love that.
The nature of, the people I know now that I've been doing this for a while, they all know different pieces of the puzzle. We're not all good at everything. So there's people that really specialize in different areas or different skill sets or different activities. And so that's part of the fun is like, I know people that like hire fishing guide after fishing guide, not because they're not happy with their guide, but because they have a different experience with every one of them.
That's interesting. How did the profession emerge historically? Because guides have played an important part of the popularity of the Adirondacks and people actually coming to the Adirondacks to vacation, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Guides were, like I said, they were the fun brokers, but they were more than that. You weren't just going to show up here and find your own way and, procure your own equipment. It didn't work like that. So they served a really necessary role in the days before widespread vehicle transportation was available. And, we also had the expansion of the middle class over the time from the middle 1800s to now. It's a very different landscape. And, when you read in between some of the historical accounts, you can my read of it is that, the middle class that you and I
Hmm.
are kind of working and teaching and cavorting with most of the time, it was more polarized in those days. I think there was the wealthy
Yeah.
class and there was the people that lived to serve them. And it's not like you didn't have any fun if you weren't wealthy. Doesn't mean that. It just there wasn't a middle class with a large expendable income and time.
Yeah. Do you feel a connection to, the famous guides of yore? How does that inspire you or influence how you think about what you're doing?
Well, by the time there's a seminal work that it gets mentioned in terms of the development of the Adirondacks and Adventures in the Wilderness. It was published in, I think, 1869 by
Yes.
John Murray.
Yep.
And that's a great place to start if you want to get a sense of what life was like in more of the formative years. And I'd say even by then, you're talking about 100 years or more of people having settled in this area. But you get a sense of the culture of people seeking adventure, seeking healing, coming to the Adirondacks for something. It's so personal that some of the people he talks about, like John Plumley, the guide, it like you feel like you know them after reading a couple stories. It's like you can, what I know of people in this area today, I can imagine knowing John. It tells me, well,
Mm,
it's not so different here. Times are different, but the culture of the area is not so different.
that's so interesting. So, how does guiding work today? How do people find you, and what are the things that you do with them?
Well, guiding is well, the internet, of course, plays a completely different makes things different. You can be on your phone traveling or doing or, hiding from your boss at work, and you could be like perusing fishing guides or having a
Right.
conversation with fishing guides. So I can't imagine it worked like that back in the day. I think back, in the 1800s, you were more linked to you were going to come and stay at the Sagamore or as guests of somebody that had a camp up here. And then you were sort of subject to what they knew, the guides that they
Right.
knew, the culture that they know. So now there's websites like Roost and organizations in every township that will help you get to, some are more organized than others, but there's lots of ways to find the activity that you want. Or if you're looking for activities, to get suggestions. I've actually, I have so many people I take ice fishing for the first time, not because they were necessarily looking for an ice fishing guide, some of them, but because they're up here in the winter. They're like, what can we do? And some of the hotels I work with are like, well, Matt will take you ice fishing. It's really fun. It's a very unusual thing, particular to this area. And we have a lot of fun with that.
Oh, that's very cool. Do you have a special license to do this? What kind of, did you just do any kind of training?
Yes. So the training and the requirements are, just think of it like this. You have a license to drive, so you're allowed to drive legally. But is that the same as meaning you're a good driver?
Right.
They're not necessarily they're not necessarily the same thing, Jane. But the I think the DEC does a really good job of managing the guide certification. And the way it works is you sign up for a test. They offer X number of times a year, and I might be wrong about the price. I think it's somewhere around $100 for the base test,
Hmm.
and then you add $20 or $25 for each activity you want. So I'm certified in fishing, hunting, boating, overnight trips. I'm not certified in ice climbing. That would be another test and another certification.
Right.
And
Right.
whitewater too. Some of the categories have their own special ways that you get certified. So you test for whitewater, but then you have to undergo a certain amount of experience on the river that you're certified for. I'm certified for the Hudson and the Indian, but you don't just get past the test and you're allowed to whitewater anywhere. You have to do a training program with guides that run that water so that you learn it and are safe.
That is very interesting. That's very cool. Yeah, I don't think I'd do the ice climbing. That sounds
You
like
know,
a little, when I see those folks, is it like Route 73 in Keene and where you can actually see some of them doing it? I'm just like, no, thank you. God go with you. But it looks super scary to me.
the more specialized the activity is, the more gear you need for it. Forget the know-how. You
Right.
need lots of gear.
Oh,
And that's
wow.
another reason that some of these sports, like, there's people that hire me for ice fishing that know how to ice fish, but they don't have their gear in this part of the world. They don't
Oh,
know
I
where to go
see.
and be safe. And so there's people that, for everybody that just that's new to the sport, there's also people that like, well, I just want to go with somebody who's good and knows is going to keep me safe and is going to teach me something. So I
Oh,
get a
that's
lot of
smart.
that too.
Yeah, that's fun.
I think ice climbing is one of those.
Right. Do any camping in the winter?
I used to do an annual trip with my brother and my buddies, and we've all gotten a little gentrified in our older age. We don't do it as much, but I'm not. Winter is, well, when you if you ask me what my favorite season, it's always the season that I'm in. I like all the
Right.
seasons up here, but winter is a really beautiful time of year. If I find somebody that's excited to go ice camp or a winter camping, I will certainly take them
Wow.
because building quinches and maintaining and cooking in the winter. I mean, it's a beautiful time of year and it's not as congested. Like it's a really beautiful time to do the Adirondack 46, for example.
Yeah, I'm not a 46er, but we'll feature, some great places to hike on our website, adktaste.com. And I'm always surprised at the number of places that I'd never thought about hiking in the winter, but really you get a whole nother experience when you hike in the winter and the ability when there's no leaves on the trees to see a lot more. Number one and two on if it's like one of those perfect sort of blue sky days and sunny, it really can be an incredible experience. How did you get into guiding? Was this something you knew you wanted to do when you were a kid, or what made you choose this calling?
You're mistaking me for somebody that had a plan, Jane. I'm very fortunate. I was given the luxury, the time to kind of find out what I wanted to do. I grew up in Long Lake, New York. I actually grew up on what is now the William C. Whitney area,
Oh,
and it was
wow.
private at that time. My father was the head forester for them. So from the ages of 5 to 16, I grew up out there with my family. And I mean, we had an outdoor lifestyle. My dad knew every inch of that place. We hunted, we fished, we lived with the seasons. And
That's great.
that's the biggest influence for sure.
Beautiful.
But
Yeah.
my first degree after there's a few other pieces. The first degree after high school was the Wilderness Recreation Leadership degree at North Country Community College. And at that time in the early 90s, it was a real innovative program. I mean, I teach now in the associated colleges up at SUNY Canton, and all those schools have an outdoor program, SUNY Potsdam and St. Lawrence and Clarkson. But in the 80s and the 90s, when I'm just getting into this, there was much fewer like Jack Drury originated this program at North Country, and it was a really known program. It was getting really big. It was backed by the Wilderness Leadership Association. I got so much out of it. We had a 30-day trip where we were out in the woods for 30 days. And so, I was always in a camp just about every night at home. We had camps we got to use. We could go out, go fishing, and come back home. So living outdoors and participating in group dynamics and expedition planning and all that is a very different way of experiencing it, looking at it, but it shaped what I like to do. It shaped how I teach. You learned about leadership styles and group dynamics. I got so much out of that program. Funny thing is, I got out of it. I loved it. I loved it even as I was doing it. But when I graduated in '94, I said, I kind of, as much as I think about anything future, I was like, this seems kind of seasonal. This doesn't seem like a really reliable income source. So where did I go eventually? I went in and out of other schools. I eventually landed on art. Talk about, you see how I planned for my resources.
Are you on your website? Let's mention your website now.
It's mattburnettguiding.com. And you can see, I have a page for my paintings and my artwork and stuff. But
It's
Matt
beautiful.
Burnett Guiding. Thank you.
Yeah, your work is really stunning. How does your guiding experience inform, the work that you do artistically?
So they're complementary for sure. When I was finding my way into art, it was a gradual process because, as I was saying, I didn't have a plan. I'm not somebody that went to school. I loved school. I did well at school, but I didn't go in a plan saying I'm going to come out and do this. And I did undergrad. I did North Country, and then I did something else for a few years. I did undergrad, and I did something else for a few years. And then I really started to get more serious about my art. And it was because I had such great teachers that made me see the potential of it. Like, it was not something you don't get told. A lot of us don't get told. I'm on the teacher side of things. I think there's a lot of people that are never told art is a career for you or design is a career for you. And of course, it's not a very secure thing either. There's a lot of risk involved in that. But of course, the world is so much richer for art. It's vitally important. And when I got better at it and got encouraged and had some success with my own career, they just naturally started to fit together. I was Long Lake, where I'm from, like, I got to back up here a little bit. Everybody takes care of everybody. I come from an area where everybody knows each other and we look out for each other. All four of my grandparents were from Long Lake. And so the ranger of Long Lake at that time, Bruce Kuhn, he approached me about this job when I was in undergrad. And he said, this would be just right for you. You should interview for it. It was assistant forest ranger. And I ended up doing that in my summers for about 10 years. It was just the perfect fit for me. All the education and outreach that rangers do, none of the heavy stuff. Like, I'm not really out there for enforcement. I was out there for safety and education. And I got to just patrol all these beautiful places like Long Lake and the Cold River and the Northville Placid Trail. And, I was doing that job and I'm like, I can bring my camera. I can do some painting hunting. And at that time, that's how it all fit together. And every year since then, it's a balancing act, but it's more of a compliment than it is a conflict. Like, the more my art is about the Adirondacks, the more everything seems to fit together. And I've just learned where is my area of expertise and where is my audience and, what is the best way to get things across. And it's a search that I'm still doing. That's a lot of fun.
That is a really beautiful story. I love how, these two things that may feel very different actually complement each other. That's lovely. That's wonderful. So as we talked about earlier, you guide in all four seasons, and you said that whichever season you're in is always your favorite. But tell us a little bit, we're still in summer, we're dead in the middle of summer. Tell me what types of trips you're doing right now. When we were just chatting before we started recording, I can't believe you're going to take sounds like 9 teenagers on a 5-day trip. What's I already know that there's no typical trip, as it were, but what are some of the experiences that someone could or you've provided for folks in the summer?
So if you don't know me from Adam and you're saying, what does this guy do? My website or my stock kind of answer would be, I do paddling, I do camping, I do fishing, both motorized and non-motorized, and I do family fun. That's the official category for it. I take families out on trips and, I customize the trips to some degree. So, you want to go paddling for 3 days or you want to go for just half day or you've got somebody that's like not comfortable in canoes. Do you have a boat that would fit that? I'm small enough that I can customize that for people. And the kids trips that you're referencing, that has become a big part of my summer. So the program is called the Northern Forest Explorers, and it's a partnership with the Northern Forest Canoe Trail. And this is actually one of the things that catapulted me further into guiding. I was a mercenary about 10 years ago. When I say I'm a mercenary, I got my guide's license. A good friend of mine, colleague Abe Gadway, is like, you really had a guide. And, all these years later, I'm like, well, I'm not rangering anymore. Yeah, why not? And I worked with him on the river for Adirondack Rafting Company. And I kind of worked for everybody. Like outdoor businesses are always looking for other help. It's a very transitional field. And so I worked with rafting companies, I worked with outfitters, I just met a lot of people and, could come in and do a job. And I think if you've got the flexibility to do that, there's a big, realm to do that season by season. But for me, I slid into this one gig and it was with the Northern Forest Canoe Trail because they've been doing this for a number of years. And it was just a natural fit for me because I'm in education. I've been teaching for, 20 plus years. And so, managing a group and keeping everybody kind of keeping a narrative involved with it, keeping everybody safe. And it was such a great fit and I enjoyed it so much. And so I've gradually taken more and more ownership of that program. And now we're running like 3 to 5 trips a summer and including trips to the Allagash in Maine. I did that as kind of I had these campers that were kind of aging out and I'm like, geez, I need, they can't just do the Raquette River trip a 5th time. I need something new for them. And I said, well, let's try it. The logistics are tough to get way out there, but let's do it. And we've done 2 of them now and people are asking me about next year already. So it's, my summers are as busy as I want them to be. And it's so much fun. I've gotten to know a new generation of people in the area that I've grown up here. And I've worked with some groups in Utica to get people that don't have the wilderness in their backyard up here and participating. It's the outdoor classroom. It's like, that's where everything good happens for me.
That's so cool. And to give young people that kind of experience, it could be formative for them. Somebody might really think, wow, this outdoor experience, this could be a career. So I think that's wonderful. That's fantastic.
On that note, Jane, I wanted to say that some of the kids that have grown up in this program with me, there's some, I'll mention Ruby and Palin that have come year after year. They were the most skilled. They were the most enthusiastic participants, although I had lots of enthusiastic participants. And at some point I just said, Ruby, you're going into college. You've got your first aid training. Come and guide. So some of these kids are making that jump now and they're helping me lead trips. And it's just so gratifying to see them put their skills to work. And they're awesome people. So they're just good people to work with too.
That's fantastic. That's so cool. Wow. You talked a lot also about people come to you and not just to learn skills, but maybe also for an opportunity to see something that they haven't seen before or just have a different kind of experience at something that they may already be familiar with, like ice fishing. Let's take that as an example. And you also said that one of the value adds is you provide all the equipment. What kind of equipment is involved in ice fishing? I mean, obviously, warm clothes, but do you need special boots? Is the the type of fishing gear different? I'm not a fisher person, so what's involved in ice fishing, and why in the world would someone want to do it? That's a
Well,
two-parter.
no problem. The easy thing about ice fishing is you have no trouble keeping your beer cold. It's really easy, that part.
All right. Well, okay. I like that part of it.
No, but it's actually changed a lot in my adult lifetime because I'm sitting here and giving this interview with you in my grandfather's house in Long Lake, and he's the guy that I learned to ice fish with. I'm looking around, I can see three ice shanties on our yard that have become sheds because that's
Oh,
what they
well.
do. And they used to build them out of wood, or I've got one made of sheet metal over here. They would kind of scavenge whatever they had. I mean, there's some lakes out in Minnesota where they build little hotels on the ice. They get pretty fancy, but around here it's sort of like, what kind of a jackstraw carpenter can you be, and how fancy can you make it with a, of a building can you make with a truck cap or something like that. And so there's a few of those remnants from that era. And I grew up, you'd have those in place and you go to the same place every weekend because it was a chore getting them on and off the ice. And now they have these pop-up tents that I can be set up anywhere in like 10 minutes. If I just carry the tent out. I mean, that's what it is. It's a big, big tent and it pops up and they're kind of igloo shaped and you ice anchor them to the ice, and they've really changed the sport because I don't fish in the same place every weekend, and you don't always need them either. There's times winter is a really funny animal. There's times where you're going, what the hell am I doing out here? And as long as you're doing it with somebody else, you're like, at least somebody is out here sharing this madness with me. And then there's times where you could be out all day. And I'm talking about cold days if there's no wind, like, below 20 degrees. I was out fishing Raquette Lake Derby last winter, and it was an outdoor day. It was cold, but it was no wind. So it was like
Nice.
I was catching up with people I hadn't seen since the summer. It was really social. And that's kind of the fun thing about ice fishing is it's not something you do by yourself. It's like you can be a visitor to ice fishing. You can go out and have a cocktail or a soda and a hot dog with your friends. And, maybe there's a pop flag that pops up and you catch a fish while that happens, but maybe you're not interested in fishing at all. You're just interested in visiting. It's all part of ice fishing. It's great.
That's amazing.
I don't know if I answered all of your questions.
You gave me a good idea. A good friend of mine and her husband, they're both good friends of mine. He's really gotten into fishing recently, and they were up here for Martin Luther weekend last year. And I don't know if it was a typical winter because it's not something I necessarily check, but it seemed like it got cold a lot earlier this year or in 24, 25. And it seemed like there was a lot more people ice fishing, on our little lake. I saw a lot of it. Anywhere Scroon Lake is not far away from here, and I go in there frequently, and you'd see all those little shanties up on the lake. But he's really interested in ice fishing, so I may be giving you a call in a couple months, and I might have to do it myself because you kind of made it sound fun.
Please come. I'd love to have you.
Oh, it'd be great. I don't know. You're turning my mind a little bit. What about do you do also in the winter snowshoeing, any ski tours, that kind of stuff too?
Yeah, I do snowshoeing. I mean, I'm a three-time 46er, so I don't do as
Wow.
much guiding of that as I used to, but I'm certainly available for that. I'm not that interested in doing, one of the really popular ones on a busy day in the middle of summer, but I took somebody that's become really good friends with me. She did her second 46 at the age of 73 with her 13-year-old grandson. Now, that's a trip I'd be glad to be part of. So, people approach me about the high peaks and they really need me and I'm available. I like to do it. But if you're peak bagging, you're going to have plenty of company out there. Don't worry about being alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. When I was first researching you and looking at your website, do you do any, I don't know if is it called game hunting if you're, deer
Yeah.
or,
Yes. Whitetail.
okay, got
So,
it.
so hunting is for me very personal. It's a big part of our family activities. It's more on the male side of our family, but all my cousins that have grown up hunting with us and my grandfather, we still get together at my father's camp on Long Lake every year. And some of those people, I've been seeing them every year of my life, my whole life. We come together, we have some good meals, we get out in the woods, we blow off some steam from work. And sometimes some of us get a deer. It's very sacred and very family oriented. And I'm certified for hunting. And I actually just took some of my favorite customers out last year with another guide, Abe Gadway, that I told you about. And we might be doing some more of that. It's a little different than what I can do with ice fishing or day fishing, because I can get you fishing in a day. But if you want to go hunting with me, I can't teach you everything that you need to know about hunting to be effective and ethical and safe in one day. It's a lot more of a commitment. So I'm still trying to figure out where that fits for my guiding. But Abe is somebody I'm very happy guiding with, and he's already really established as a hunting guide. So I think we'll be doing some more together.
And bow and arrow, gun, what's your weapon of choice?
I grew up, it's been a while, but I started with bow hunting, and my first few deer with bow. And that's one of my great wishes every year, that I wish I had time to shoot my bow, because I really enjoy shooting archery. It's a really zen thing. It's really hard to describe. Guns are tools. I don't dislike them. I don't love them. They're just a tool. And, you have to put practice into them to be good too. But archery was a different thing for me. And I don't hunt archery these days simply because I don't have the time to put into being accurate. So when I guide, it would be for rifle and in the backcountry up here in the Adirondacks.
Yeah. And for listeners who are thinking about Bambi right now, hunting is actually important for, I don't know if conservation is the right word, you tell me, but the deer putt, when there's an overpopulation of deer, they starve, they spread disease. And so, it's important. And since I just hit one with my car, or rather it hit me and totaled my car a couple weeks ago. Yeah. I'm like, bring on the venison. So I don't know if you have a point of view on that, but I do think that, controlling the deer population is important.
There's quite a discussion to have about history and philosophy of game hunting and fishing. It's probably too small of a space to do it here, but one thing I would ask everybody to think about, the facts are, it is a way of life for generations up here. It's how people fed their families. And just in my own family, as I said, I'm sitting here in my grandfather's house looking at a painting of him. He was in a large family. He grew up in Long Lake during the Depression, and you better believe that venison was part of how they fed their family. Like that, a deer would go a long way. And I also grew up on venison. And my parents weren't, I won't say they're poor. They're working class, and they did well by me. But we had venison way more than we had beef. But my father, if you're going to get into hunting, there's a lot to own in that. I guess I would say that. It's not something where if you want to sign up and go kill something in a weekend, it's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah.
It's very personal. I can't tell anybody what to think about it. But one thing I can tell you from the fishing standpoint, I see this every summer with my Explorer trips, is that kids, if you've done anything with kids are fussy to eat, right? Like they're picky about what they eat. They almost slaughtered me one time when I had hot dogs without ketchup. And but whenever we catch a bass or a pike, and we catch it at the right time of the day where I could keep it safe and keep it cold until we eat it, I take the opportunity to cook it and eat it, because what the kids love to do it. If you've caught it yourself, it is a different thing, and it's an experience that people want to have. They want to be part of the cycle of it. I'm going a little bit on a limb here, but I've just seen that, I've seen that reaction over and over again. Kids are the pickiest of the kids. If they caught the fish, I'm definitely going to have a bite of that. And some don't like it, but most of them get really excited about that. And that's an experience they really take with them, because we're so disconnected from the natural world these days. So hunting and fishing that brings us back to our roots. That's and to be good at it, you have to pay attention to nature. You can't just go in with your electronics and have it all done for you. It looks like that because there's all these crazy tools that we buy. But to be a good hunter, you have to really learn the animal you're hunting. You have to learn the ecology, the biology, and then you have to be patient and put in your time. I don't worry about people with the $5,000 sonar fishing out the lake for that reason, because
Right.
that's not the whole thing that's
Oh,
going to
that's
get it done.
interesting. Yeah. And I think it's important to really know firsthand where your food comes from. And I don't want to get off on a tangent, but we were talking about a haggis earlier today.
Oh God.
And one of my nephews, we were we were in Scotland together, and he kept saying he was going to eat haggis, and he was the pickiest eater in our family. He finally had it. We were at a pub, and he could have it as an appetizer, and we split it. And I don't think he became a big haggis fan, but he didn't really know what was in haggis. He just heard of haggis, and so he posted something on social media, and his friends are like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you ate, spleen and, all the nasty parts that go into a haggis." And he freaked out at me, and he's like, "Aunt Jane, why did you let me eat that?" And I just said, "Listen, buddy, you eat hot dogs and chicken nuggets, so you should find out what's in those things too." So it's a little bit of a tangent, but I do think it's important. And I also think it's important, if you're going to hunt or fish, use what you've harvested, right? Don't if you're going to kill a deer, eat the deer, and to the greatest extent possible, which is where haggis came from. Use every part of the deer if you can. So, all right.
Well, one thing I would like to add to what we're saying without keeping it a tangent is that, well, you asked about my influences, and probably, I mean, obviously, I learned a lot from my family and where I grew up, but the guys that my dad hunted with, and my grandfather was one of them, we had a camp out on the west end of Little Tupper Lake. It's all state now. There's no camps out there anymore. But I grew up seeing how they engaged with the wilderness, how they enjoyed the resources, how they respected them, and how they approached the art of hunting. And I can tell you, I feel so privileged. And that's why I won't take anybody, I'm not going to take anybody casually hunting.
Yeah.
It's taken me a lifetime to learn from them what I've learned, and I'm not near the hunter that they are either. I really had good, strong examples of respecting the animal, using the animal. They did all their own butchering at that time. And they just, I learned so much from them, and just basically how to be a responsible person in the wilderness.
That's great. You've mentioned the names of a couple of guides. Any notable historic guides who've really inspired you?
Well, I mentioned John Plumley from Murray's Stories, Adventures in the Wilderness, and there's a lot more to read about him. So he was a big figure in the Long Lake area here. Two of my favorites are, well, only one of them is technically a guide, French Louie and Verplanck Colvin, and they were a lot of things more than they were guides, which is, I think, kind of a common story in the Adirondacks. We're all more than one thing up here.
Right. Yes.
So French Louie was a famous hermit that lived most of his life in the West Canada lakes. You can still find some good landmarks that he would have used from that time. There's, if you know what to look for, there's some really cool like places that he stayed in that you can find. And there's a great book about him by Harvey Durham, which gives a great picture about life in and around our wilderness areas in the early 20th century. To be fair, like I said, guiding is only one thing that he did. He was, looking after himself and living in the way that he wanted to. And he did it his way. I think that's the only way to do it. Verplanck Colvin, not known as a guide, he's the guy that surveyed the Adirondacks. And he was commissioned. I'm trying to remember. I thought it was by the state government. I'd have to go back and reread that part. But he lasted through, I think it took him something like 12 years, and he went through more than one government office. There was a couple of years he wasn't getting paid. He just took that task so seriously and did so much innovating to see it done. He developed some tools that they used in surveying. He triangulated the whole Adirondacks, and he just saw it through. He hustled his crew, got their equipment up all those mountains before there was trails. And I admire his problem solving, his stubborn enthusiasm, and just the fact that he did it so well. I've talked to surveyors that have had the do surveying next to some of where he was the last one that had reported on it. And they said for the equipment that he had at the time, he's as accurate as anybody.
Yeah, I think we had somebody on recently who said that, or I read this somewhere, that for the equipment that he had on the time, he was incredibly accurate. That's great. French Louie comes up a lot. So that's a name that I'm super familiar with. So that's fantastic.
I told you about growing up on William C. Whitney area, the
Mm.
combination of growing up there and growing up with my father, who really enjoyed and showed me all of that, and all our other family members and friends that encouraged that lifestyle, that was the bedrock upon which, I got to do all this and got to be really good at it.
Do you have any advice for someone who's dreaming of living closer to the land or building sort of a career like yours? What would you tell them maybe they should start doing or stop doing, or I don't know. Any thoughts you have based on your journey that were you wish you would have known back in the day?
Well, I think there's every opportunity now. I mean, the Adirondack Park, there's no better place to learn. It's open to everybody. It's free. And there's more resources than there ever was. The gear is better than it ever was. So there's infinite ways to do it yourself. I mean, you can put apps on your phone that help you identify flora and fauna and bird sounds. So you can educate yourself if you work well that way. But there's also, you don't have to do it all yourself. There's some of the guides that are working now, like Abe Gadway. I've mentioned Ed Cans is a great naturalist. Like I've have had him come and do tours with our young folks, and he just gets them all really interested in tree species and frog species, and somehow gives you a lesson without ever thinking that you're in school. Like he's just that good at it. There's tons of people to learn from. If you like to learn from books, there's books. If you like to just go out and experience it, you can do that. And if you're not comfortable doing a trip by yourself, like some people are hiring me to do the 46 or whatever they're doing just because they want another person to be safe. They don't want to travel alone. And, there's somebody I kayak with every fall, and we do a 2 or 3 day trip, and she's perfectly capable, but she does not want to do it alone. She wants to have the safety of someone else if something goes on. It's all there. So it's just, don't wait, basically. Enjoy it and make sure you have the proper gear when you go. Like I talked about winter hiking, it's beautiful, but don't go up there with your 5 pounds of gear and expect that somebody's going to rescue you if you break an ankle. They will, but somehow you got to keep warm in the meantime between you breaking the ankle and them getting to you. And then how are they going to get to you? If you're in a place without cell phone, how are you going to communicate with people? So communication, navigation, first aid, that's all stuff that when you hire a guide, you're getting somebody that's certified and experienced in those things. So if you're not going to take it upon yourself, make sure you hire somebody that does do that part so that you're covered.
It's a great point. We had folks from Search and Rescue of the Northern Adirondacks on the podcast probably 6 months, or maybe it was even last fall. Very fascinating conversation, if I do say so myself. But we talked about what kind of equipment they carry and sort of the 10 essentials for hiking, and how many times people just go out, and sometimes they're often very well prepared, but how essential it is, things like not just a headlamp, two headlamps because batteries die, and the right footwear, and how cotton can really be your enemy in terms of fabrics, and what kind of just clothes you should wear. So I'm all in on having the right stuff to make sure not only that you're safe, but you have a good time. You're not going to have a good time if your feet are wet and cold and you're miserable. So I think that's a really good point. What's one of the most memorable moments you've had while guiding?
Oh, let's see. There's good memorable, and there's not too much bad memorable. I've enjoyed almost anybody I've ever guided with, and I've enjoyed the trips, and that keeps it fun for me. There's one trip that comes to mind. This is a funny thing that happened, but it might not have been funny at the time. I had these two couples with their kids with me, and there were families I really enjoyed and had fun with. But we were out at William C. Whitney area, where I grew up, and it's gotten pretty popular. So we were there, I think, in August, and all the campsites were taken. And we were moving from one campsite to another, and we got over to Round Pond, and I was starting to think maybe we're foolish to leave our campsite because I don't know if there's any other ones out here. So I said, you go clockwise around the lake. I'll go counterclockwise. Get the first. If you see an empty site, take it, and I'll eventually get to you. If I see a site first, I'll set up a tent and come get you. We'll make sure we get a site that way. And when I finally caught up with them, an hour later, the husbands and the wives had somehow split up. They had already
Uh,
set up a campsite somewhere, and I had claimed a different site, but they liked it better, the husband. So the husbands then went back to explain to their wives why they were going to break down that whole campsite and move the campsite, and they had like extensive gear and stuff to the other campsite that I had just grabbed. And I said, I just want to be somewhere else while this is all going
ah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And have you ever had a trip that just went sideways? And, what did you learn from it?
Well, I mean, honestly, that's sort of the sideways trip, but it wasn't really bad.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that you're going to joke about. You joke about the funny stuff, right? And sometimes I think on our ice fishing trips, we spend about 10% of our time fishing, about 40% of our time planning meals, about another 40% of our time fixing snowmobiles, and the other 10% just arguing over the rules of the derby or whatever. It's all just an excuse for fun. It's all like the stories you remember and stuff. So I do want to tell you oh, actually, I remember a trip where we got into a little trouble. So Heath and Tom and Keith, my brother, will all remember this. We were doing the Dix Range in the winter, and I really injured my knee on the way up Macomb. It's a big slide, and somehow going the way the nature of the injury that was going steeply down was worse than going up. And so I said, geez, well, I don't see four mountains in our future today. Let's find the easiest way to get back to where we're camping. And I've made this mistake a few times in my life, but I needed to learn the lesson again. Bushwhacking in the Adirondacks is often almost undoable. It's so thick, we don't when there's blowdown, we don't get rid of it. They did it, a different paradigm. They did it back in the mid 20th century, but they don't do it now. So those jackstraw trees and stuff just kind of pile up in the woods. And we just found that going through the woods was probably the worst decision I could have made in that situation. And I'm the one that pushed us all into it. And we had to, somebody broke a snowshoe. We had to duct tape that. We weren't out of the woods until well after dark. And you were trying to find a trail that hadn't even been broken yet with our lights. So I've been in small trouble like that a few times. It's small trouble that could turn into big trouble. And it's just good to like learn from it. Later on when we got back to camp and slept on it and had another day, we debrief these things. We say, well, what did we do wrong? How could we have avoided that? And hopefully we get wiser and smarter from it, because it's good to realize when you're at danger's door, the decisions become more important. And when we're hypothermic or when we're injured or when it's a stressful situation, that's when you're exactly inclined not to do the right thing because you're not thinking clearly. So it's important to, the longer we do this, we sometimes get complacent, and it's good to say, okay, if you broke your leg right now, could you survive on what you had in your bag? How would it go? Think it through. We still play that game a lot.
That's good. That's important. And again, it applies to life too, I think. And just
Mm-hmm.
sort of, if a deer hits your car, what are you going to do? So that's good to know. What's something you think your guests teach you?
Well, I always get to see, I mean, it's different than rangering. Rangering, I was traveling by myself and I was interacting with people, guiding, traveling with people. So, who you're with, just like I said, who you hire as your guide flavors a trip. Your customers do too. And I have some people I see every year, and I'm glad to see them, and we have a fun time. And in some groups we get really into fishing, and other groups we might get into Adirondack history or guide boats. It's everybody has something to tell you about, and I like to find out how people make their living, what they do. It's just I've talked to horse veterinarians, people that have design companies, people that are in just some jobs that I can only imagine, and they describe them to me. And then some things I'm like, oh, I wonder how it is doing that, and you can tell me while we're fishing. So it's an exchange. You're passing the time, you're doing something fun, and you're learning from each other.
I love that. How do you balance sort of this fun, active adventure part of your life with the stillness required for your passion for painting, in a studio? Is that tough? Do they each sort of complement each other?
Well, the main conflict I have with that is time. So the paintings that I was doing regularly 20, 25 years ago, they take me months to finish, days or months. If I have three paintings going, maybe I can finish them all in a few months. If I have 25 paintings going, and I'm really good these days at starting things and then not getting back to them in the studio because, life is busy. And I'm like, there'll always be a rainy day. Or maybe there'll be a rainy day when I can get back to it. I don't worry as much as I do about finishing work. Like if I don't finish something, what's the worst thing that happens? It stays unfinished in my studio. But rowing my guideboat and enjoying these trips that I have with, the Northern Forest Explorers and just doing things with the guides I'm working with while I'm able-bodied, I'm like, there's nothing better than that. So I'm like the studio can wait. And my most recent exhibition, I tried something different. Instead of showing paintings, I showed photographs. I went over my photographic archive. And like I said, 20 years ago, it used to be I was going around looking for paintings with my camera. But I look at all the pictures I've taken of the explorers, and there's some good landscapes and stuff in there, but they're about the kids, the adventures the kids that are having. I've got a picture of Palin Hampel I mentioned. She's 10 years old and in my guideboat with some of her buddies. And then I've got another photograph from 10 years later, or nearly 10 years later, and she's in college or heading into college and rowing that same boat, all grown up. It's like, it's really cool to see that.
That's awesome.
We had an exhibition called The River in Long Lake, and a lot of these people came to see the photographs. And I'm like, well, not everything has to be painted, but I still got to do something with all the images I'm getting. So
That's awesome. That's amazing. You mentioned rain. What happens if you have something booked with somebody and it rains? Do you go rain or shine?
I'm pretty much rain or shine through most of the year. I'd say the most difficult, well, basically any time of the year, if it's not safe to go, I'll cancel the trip. And, there's a lot of factors in that. If somebody's driving from a long way, I'm going to find something for them to do, because if they're up here, I'm not going to cancel the trip. Well, there's a few relative things in this. So what's inhospitable? In ice fishing, for some people, just the fact that you're doing it is inhospitable. And then for other people, I had some people hire me, and it was going to be a high of -14. Listen, I know you're coming. This is what the weather's supposed to be. That's pretty intense. Do you have any flexibility? Man, we can go on Sunday instead. And then I looked ahead and I said, oh, Sunday, -17 high. And I'm like, oh boy. So I said, look, this is what it's going to be like. It's going to be like being on another planet on that ice. We're going to be stuck in the shanty all day. If you want to go, I'll take you. But that's what it's going to be like. If there was kids on that trip, I would have said, no, we got to cancel. But it was two adults. They turned up. We went. We actually caught a few fish, one in the shanty and one outside that we had to triple wrap our faces and go get. And we had a good day in the shanty, jigging and cooking venison, and it was fun. When people book me, I do everything I can to accommodate them. So if something comes, first of all, if I'm not available, I try to get them connected to a guide that I trust if I can, because then I know they're going to have a good time. If the weather's tricky and they got little kids or something, I'll try to give them some other options. But generally speaking, if you look at your phone in just about any season, you're not going to see a perfect thing most of the time. And if you wait for perfection, you're never going to get it. So just going out prepared for the range of weather that you're about to experience, it's the best way to enjoy the outdoors. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're not making our living out there. We are just enjoying ourselves. We've got the best gear that humanity's ever had. Let's just be prepared and enjoy whatever nature gives to us.
I love that. Matt, this has been such a great conversation. I just have a couple of last questions I wanted to ask you. What do you hope your clients take away from a trip with you?
Well, I hope they enjoy it enough to call me again or recommend me to someone else. I hope I can share with them a part of the world that they haven't seen and that they can see why I like it so much.
That's awesome. Anything coming up in the art side of your world? Any exhibits happening? Anything you want to update us on?
Yeah, there's actually there's two things that have happened recently. So I told you about the photographic exhibition. There's going to be another showing of that work at the Saranac Hotel the first 2 weeks of September. So we're trying to have it coincide with the 90-miler race, and you'll be able to see some photographs from all these adventures I've been talking about with the area youth. So that'll be cool. And I didn't get to talk about it in the interview, but there's one of the pieces of art that I've been really proud of this last couple of years. I restored a guideboat, and guideboats are a whole thing that you'd have to do a whole other interview to
Yes.
to cover all the things I want to talk about with the guideboats. But they're something I grew up with, and they're from this area. And so I had this wreck of a guideboat that my friend was going to restore, Heath, and he started a family and got busy, and he said, "Do you want to try it?" And it sat in my garage for a couple of years, and then I did little bits here. I ordered new oar straps for it. I caned seats, made new seats for it, little pieces here. And then I said during COVID, I'm going to move it into my studio. I'm going to finish this thing because we were all stuck at home. Well, I had about 3 years of Zoom meetings with that hulk of a guideboat behind me in my studio. And then one year, I just all clicked into place. I went and I finished it, and I painted a mural on it.
Oh, wow.
The mural tells the story. It tells about growing up in Whitney Park and just in the time that I've lived in and what's happening environmentally and so on. And so that has actually been shown in a few places. Right now, it's in Abe Gadway's store in it's Adirondack Mountain Outfitters in Indian Lake, and it's probably going to be showing it in some other places too. But I'm not a great boat builder, but my years of rowing a guide boat have sort of given me enough information to adequately fix it up. And then I think it's one of a kind in terms of having a mural on it. So it's a good catch-all between all the things I do, guiding and rowing and storytelling through painting.
We actually are working on a guest to talk about building guide boats. Stay tuned, listener, for that. It's a very fascinating process. In fact, I was up at the Adirondack Experience recently in Blue Mountain Lake and had a chance to watch their boat builder in residence, Nate
Oh, that's Nate.
Atkinson.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's awesome.
it was, and he answered all of our nerdy questions about what it is and how it's done and how long it takes to build it. And it's all done by hand. But one of the things I thought was really fascinating is I asked him, how many of these do you build a year? And he said, I actually don't build that many a year. I restore them. And I said, what's the average age? And he said, some of them are like 150 years old, which really knocked me out. I mean, he said that in general, they're all the ones that he's restoring have been around 75, 80, 90, 100 years or more, which blew my mind. So listener, if you're up here this summer, he's right there in the boat building at the ADKX. I definitely recommend stopping by and checking that out on a day that he's there.
Yeah, I got to work with Nate last year. We had a day, and I think we're going to do it again, where we rowed 5 different boats, and one of them was one of the Grant boats that they have in the museum. He rowed that one. It was interesting because I had to find rowers because for every 2 people we needed a rower. But I've got quite a collection of guide boats myself,
Wow.
and we did like a lunch picnic row thing, and it was pretty successful. So, and we had a nice calm day in Blue Mountain Lake. We got to switch positions out in the boat, and it was low
and slow.
I'm hoping that we're doing it again. The guide boat is definitely a symbol of, they're from right in this area. And I think I'm one of the few guides that's still doing trips in them. So I have some traditional boats that I get to do trips in, and they're not right for every trip, but it's perfect to fish out of. It's just perfect.
That's great. This, as I said before, Matt, has been fantastic. Let's remind our listeners again, your web address is Matt Burnett, BURNETT guiding.com. Definitely, yes. You can see some of his beautiful artwork, listener, and lots of pictures from his trips. But before we release you into the wild again, we end every episode of our podcast by asking our guests to tell us about their favorite places in the Adirondacks. And this episode, you've already shared a million incredible places, and it can be anything: a trail, a restaurant, a theater, a general store.
Well, being from Long Lake, I got to talk about some of the businesses that are Long Lake is doing really well. I'm happy to see it because we're a small town really dependent on tourism. And I see all these families that are moving into the area, and some that are moving back to this area that grew up in here. And we're seeing businesses that have been in here for generations continued in a fresh manner. Or we're seeing some new businesses come in. So I'll give you a one stop for two businesses that are really, and it takes place in a landmark building. There's a furniture store, used to be a furniture store, Helms Village store, in right as you come into town on Route 30 from Tupper Lake. And the Helmses are of this area. They run the plane business. They're all really awesome. That business came to an end. And there's two new businesses in the same building. The Trading Post, which is run by my friends Billy and Vicky, and they do lobster sandwiches. If you hit them on the right day, I think it's Fridays, you can get a lobster sandwiches that is good as anything you'll get in Maine. Really awesome. And in the same building, you have the Natural Edge, which is a gallery with my own work is in there, but there's several local artists, Camille and Gary and Alyssa. And they're doing a tremendous job. This is their second year with the gallery. And I'm just so happy to see somebody representing the creativity and craft that we have around here. They're just really tremendous.
That's fantastic. I will definitely have to make my way over there on a Friday for that lobster sandwich. And I love a good gallery. And people think about the Adirondacks so much about all the, outdoor adventure activities, but there's some really great galleries dotted all across the Adirondacks. There's two in Saranac Lake. There's a really cool place in North Creek called Heart Studios. Here where we are near Chestertown, there's Birds of a Feather. So if you're craving looking at good art or it's a rainy day, you have lots of opportunity to appreciate local craftspeople and the amazing things that they are doing. So that's a great one. Thanks. I will definitely put the link, if there is a link, to either the Facebook page or website for both of those businesses. So thanks for sharing that. And thank you again for your time today. Good luck on your adventure with the teenagers this week. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. It sounds like there's going to be great weather. And just, Matt, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jane. It was really fun.
Great. Take care. Bye-bye. Listener, I hope you found that episode as interesting as I did. Matt just has so many great tales to tell, and I loved his point that even if you are an experienced hiker, snowshoer, fisher person, whatever, that there's a lot of benefit in doing it with a guide who might be able to show you something new, teach you something new, or just be a great partner on one of these things. Thank you again for tuning into ADK Talks. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. It helps others discover not only our show, but also how to find out the best things to do and places to visit in the Adirondack Park. And for more exclusive content and local insights, as we mentioned before, visit adktaste.com and be sure to sign up for our weekly newsletter so you never miss an update. Until next time, keep exploring and enjoying the fabulous Adirondacks. Take care. Bye-bye.